Hello, this is a TradeSight trading recap for Wednesday, February 15th, 2012. This is a look at the Apple 5-minute chart. This is as of the close on Tuesday the 14th, so we're going to be looking forward and moving the bars forward as we go here. But a couple features before we get to today's trading action. First of all, you've got two lines that you can see here. There's a dashed green line, which we call the upper gap fill threshold, and a dashed red line, which we call the lower gap fill threshold. These are levels that we get every day. They're different numbers, and they mean different things to the market. For example, when you gap above the green one, usually you keep going for initially. You don't necessarily pull back to fill the gap. Also, there'll be support and resistance points throughout the day. You'll see them used in a variety of fashions. So let's take a look at some of the Apple trading today as it played out during the session. Now, the opening bar on Apple on Wednesday the 15th, as you can see here, was a big gap up in the market. And in fact, we opened above. You can see a new dashed green line right here. That's the new upper gap fill threshold level, which we opened above on the session, which often, as I said, means that you're going to keep going higher instead of heading back in to fill the gap where you can gap beyond those levels. So another feature to look at here is we've got a count going. You can see these green numbers currently at 7 above the bars, and what those are, it's a look back methodology, and we're looking for the count under the rules of the methodology to get to a 9. Okay, if we can get to a 9, that's usually what we call a setup phase for a secondary count that could potentially lead to a sell signal. So let's take a look at how this plays out. There's your 9, and now you can see as we got that 9, we've also gotten a second set of numbers in pink or magenta. And we're going to watch these. These use a different methodology for looking back, but there's still a counting mechanism. If they get to a 13, that would be an area that we would generally view as a sell signal in the market. So let's take a look as Apple moves forward, and you can see there's the 7, there's the 8. How does Apple play out? Well, again, it goes a little higher, bases, goes a little higher again. There's a 10, there's an 11, there's a 12. We can get our 13 here. No, not yet. More basing sideways action here out of Apple, and we're about at this point an hour and a half into the market. We've definitely squeezed higher since the gap up, opening above that gap fill threshold. But how do you figure out where the top might occur? So here again, we try to sweep the highs, didn't really go anywhere. A little more sideways action. Okay, now here's a big bar up. Now, how do you know any given bar that you're making new highs? Is it a continuation? Is it the final top? Well, here on that bar, we get a 13 sell signal. Now, is that going to be a big deal to the market or not, using what's called our Comer? That's what the sell signal comes in, the TradeSight Comer count. Let's see how the market plays off after that. So far, that's the top. We're starting to roll over. Oh, look at that. Look at this acceleration. Here we are. We're down 10 points on Apple since that sell signal. Okay. Now, on top of it, we had another live trade call that we put into the Messenger where we deliver our calls to our subscribers, and it looked like this. You can see right here we've got a call Apple short under 514.43. Okay, so we gave that to our subscribers. That's coming up. Now again, first you get the sell signal up here, so that's one entry point for our aggressive subscribers. Then you've got a more standard sell signal, which is short under the opening low. Okay, and if we then break through this green line, it's a high probability we're going to make it all the way back to the gap, the close of the prior session. Now, everybody, you might say at this point, well, that seems like wishful thinking. I mean, this is Apple. The stock's up huge for the day. Are you really going to get all the way back down to that 509 number from being as high as 527? That's a lot of range on the stock. Well, look what happens. Okay, we break under the lows of the day. We break through the gap fill threshold line, and here we are filling the gap from the prior day's close. Okay, now let's see what else happens as the rest of the day plays out. So the next thing I see on this chart is I see our lower gap fill threshold down here, and it's also lined up with a solid red line. That's the static trend line. That's the lowest point of the 9-bar setup phase that we saw back over here. So the low from that bar back at near the end of yesterday's action. Okay, let's see what happens here. So we come down, come right near that area. Okay, there it is. Now we breached it, but came right back up. And you have to excuse the dog. She's excited about this action too. But you have to. We've breached the level here, but you can see we couldn't really close underneath it. So there's a gap fill threshold and static trend line right next to each other become support after this high velocity move to the downside. Okay. So let's keep moving forward and see what happens. Do we get some kind of a bounce? And remember, at this point, we're traded 20-some points of range on Apple for the day, which is a lot of range. And so we get a little bounce. Where's that bounce going to lead back to? Let's take a look. Well, so far here we are back at that upper gap fill threshold, that green line that we had from the start of the day. Surely that won't stop the... oh, it did. Okay, so there we are. We've run into that wall and we can't get through. And we roll over to the downside yet again. And this time, can we breach the lower line now that we've had some time to consolidate? And you can see that, again, we're finding a little support at that lower gap fill threshold. And then as late in the day, as the sellers come in again, Apple breaks down. And what you'll notice is that we now have green 1 through 9 count in the other direction to the downside. We have a green 1 through 9 count over here to the downside. And from that original count, we've got a new Comer count, the pink line, the pink numbers going downward here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, we're looking for 13. Here's 9, 10, 11. There's 12. And there's your 13. Now it's getting late in the day at that point. What could remain of the session? Not much. So with that in place, and there's the end of the day, the low is called by the 13. So the high of the day is the Comer sell signal, the 13 up here at the top. The low of the day is the Comer buy signal here. And you can see how the gap fill threshold levels and the static trend line were used several times in different ways throughout the session. That's very technical action that most traders do not have and therefore don't participate properly in the market.